Top. Oké, daar is die. De uitkomsten van de Mystery Bird Quiz. Het wordt een spannende, dat kan ik al wel vertellen. Maar ik laat de uitslag en alles verder over aan de man himself. So please welcome Killian. There you are.
I tried to escape, but they caught me. So I'm feeling a little bit guilty, I must admit, because I've spoken to a few people, and it seems that it was a little more difficult than I had planned. And I think the thing that I underestimated is the stress of the situation, especially for people who really enjoy mystery competitions. You know, when there's a time limit and you know the potential of getting things wrong and the potential embarrassment. Not that there should be any embarrassment, but I know that stress factor is really significant. So something that would be really obvious to you when you're on your home computer or you open the magazine isn't so obvious when you're in this situation. The other thing I was reminded to say that the winner of this competition, I gather, will be asked to set the next competition. That's why I'm here, because I unfortunately won it. I think most people probably put in some deliberate wrong answers last time, but I didn't know that. And I ended up with the short straw. So I'll go through these pretty quickly. If I'm running short on time, just give me a sign, yeah. Okay. So, obviously, I hope, a dowager. And it's really a choice of two because Asian dowager hasn't really occurred. I think it's occurred once in our area. But anyone who knows a bit about dowager identification knows that you have to age them first. And if you're lucky, it's a juvenile, because most juveniles are quite clearly different. And the feature you look for in a juvenile is the tertials and the graded coverts. They are rather plain in long build and usually rather strongly patterned in short build. But there are exceptions to every rule. And in some long build, they're like this. They have a kind of weak ghost pattern that recalls short build. I have another shot of this bird, where the markings aren't quite so obvious. But this, I'm afraid, is a long-billed dowager. I photographed this in Poole Park in the south of England. It was sound recorded, but it's important in case you're going to claim Holland's first short build. I don't think it's occurred yet. To be aware that a small minority of long bills have these somewhat short bill-like tertials. And in that case, when it's got winter scapulars, these broad, very broad, dark centres are more characteristic of long billed and short billed.
So that's, I'm sure I'll just translate that. Grote grijze snip. Yeah, sure if it works.
Yeah. Oh, grote grijze snip.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have the Dutch names, but okay. So I won't labour this one too much. Next one, obviously a duck. The answer is, well, I'll show you the next slide, or the previous slide. It's easier then. So this is a gargany, a juvenile gargany.
Zomerpaling.
Yeah. And one of the features, I mean, all these small ducks are rather similar, but one feature that distinguishes it from a teal, is that there's no colour in the secondaries. Teal always has obvious green inner speculum. And the head pattern too is rather strongly marked, very typical of gargany. Okay. And that's what I was doing just before. This is a juvenile with those very pointed upper flank feathers. And actually, the other thing is that they can be very dark on the wing, the juvenile females especially. They don't have any grey on the wing. Okay, next slide. These are always a bit of a headache. I had several shots of this bird, and I chose one of the more difficult ones. This is a parasitic skua, Arctic skua, and probably the key feature here is the bill. Sorry, that's the same bird. It's a little bit easier then. Not a very prominently marked rump, but I'll go back to the other shot. Some people may have gone for Pomerine because there's a hint of a double crescent here, but that is actually often seen in juvenile Arctic skua too. Pomerine would tend to be a little bit paler in the headed and have a much bigger, stronger bill in the head. But we could spend the next 3 hours talking about skuas, and I'm not going to do that.
Kleine jager.
Same bird. This was off north of Spain. I spent a long time watching this bird, hoping it would show itself properly, because this vegetation was blocking it. But sometimes the bad shots are useful. It's very easy when you see the next shot.
Smyrna Gost.
And it doesn't have the strong streak of an orton on it. I think you can see the eye ring, but it's so grey and dull, it can only be a Cenarius bunting. This was on the island of Lesbos, where it's quite a common bird in the west. So, if I put them in like that, you would have found it a bit too easy, I think. Another Lesbos bird. Not too difficult. I forgot to ask how much difficulty, but it's a little bit easier when it lifts its head. This is a juvenile crested lark. When I first came to Holland, this was quite a common bird, but it's gone now. Okay.
So Killian, sorry, why is not a lot of people have a calandra lark or?
Oh, okay. Hold on, let me just go back. Calandra lark. Well, it's a juvenile lark for a start, and I've never seen a juvenile calandra lark. I'm certainly not looking at that. I think the bill, even though the bill is head on, it's not that heavy a bill. It's more of a long pointed bill. A calandra lark would have a much deeper bill, and I think a calandra lark, even a juvenile, would probably have stronger dark marks here. But I'm guessing a little bit because a juvenile calandra lark is not a bird I know. And the situation is also very typical of the habitat. You know, this was a stream running over a road. So I'm going to skip over that one. This was a real stinker. Even when I was going through my own photographs, and I came across this, and I'd forgotten where I was, and I was thinking, what the hell is this? Which one is this? But as we all do when we see sandgrouse, we look at the males, and we kind of ignore the females. So this was a pair of chestnut-bellied sandgrouse in Oman. And I included this because I had to have one or two really difficult ones in order to be sure that not everyone got, the same result.
Roodbuik zandhoen. Nobody got this right.
Sorry about that. I wouldn't have got it right either if I'd been in the competition. I kind of had two stinkers, one after the other, but many people, if they didn't think too much about this, might have just thought, well, it looks like a black-tailed gullet, it must be a black-tailed gullet. But you'll notice that it has this dark upper mandible, which is a very important feature of Hudsonian godwit.
Rode gutten.
Yeah. And in addition, you can see this this black auxiliary feather poking out here, which you can sometimes see. But as I said, some of the easy birds are not as easy as they look, and some of the difficult birds are easier than they look. So we go back to this bird. It doesn't really look like a Hudsonian godwit in any other respect. I mean, it doesn't have the shape of a Hudsonian godwit, which is a bill more like a bar-tailed. It looks a bit too long-legged for a Hudsonian godwit. So I'll just go on to one more shot. It's the same bird when the bill was washed. There wasn't as much mud on the face. So this was a trap for those of you who know a lot more than the others. So this is a black-tailed godwit in Wexford. I wish it had been a Hudsonian, but it's a black-tailed.
Grote.
These head-on birds can be very difficult. I think this one is not too difficult. I'm not sure how many people got, but this is the greater crested tern.
Grote kuifstern.
And the size of the bill is really quite a stout bill, too stout for a lesser crested. The colour is a slightly greenish colour. It's not so orange as a lesser crested tern, and it's very dark, very, very broad, dark primary tips. This was in Oman. It's a common bird there, and you often have the two together. This is another difficult one. These are falcated ducks.
Bronskop-eenden.
And the only thing I can say in my defence is that nothing else has that wing pattern. Nothing else has that strange mixture of a gargany and a widgeon. I saw these birds in Mongolia last August, and every time I saw them, I kept thinking of gadwall and mallard. Kept reminding me of the two. I don't have any other photographs of falcated duck with which to explain the features, but I think the combination of this rather widgeon-like head pattern and this, importantly, this wing pattern is very, very distinctive. There's nothing else quite like that, and the shape. So I don't imagine too many people got that right. But I think this is a bit easier, but it's not any commoner. Probably best to show you the next slide. You've probably all seen one, or most of you, but maybe not quite as close as this. This is a little curlew.
Kleine regenwulp.
Yeah. I almost came over to see the one in Holland, but it left. This is another one where, again, I'm afraid I chose a slightly too difficult photograph. I don't know, would it have been any easier if you'd seen this? This is a female Bousier's redstart in Morocco.
Diadeemroodstaart.
It's a shorter tailed and it's got quite a strong orange colour underneath. I'm feeling quite guilty now for having chosen some of these. So obviously one of the shanks. I suspect a few people will have guessed a spotted redshank because it's very long billed and appears to have orange just on the lower mandible. But it's not quite long billed enough, and it doesn't have the little tip on the bill. And the rest of the features look more like a redshank. And it's funny how I think in the next photograph it looks more like a long-billed redshank. And this is the I think it's Ursuriensis, the slightly long-billed race of redshank that occurs in the Middle East. This was in Oman. And it's extremely worn and bleached, so that adds to the difficulty. Doodaloo. So, a juvenile shrike. This was on Lesbos, where there are 4 species of shrikes, and you can see juveniles of all 4. And they're all quite common. But I chose this photograph just to show you the difference it makes. A split second later, the same bird. But sometimes the camera can really mislead. The tail doesn't look so long there, it looks a little bit more normal proportion. But this is a juvenile masked shrike.
Masked klawier.
With a very black tail and white sides. And the bill is not so heavy as here's a woodchat for comparison. Rather brownish, reddish tail even. And a heavier bill. And the tail, of course, is not so long. I think this was a very difficult one. It would be much easier if it just took its bill out. And I think this is extra difficult because it's so warm, it's so rufous. This was in Mongolia again, and I'm not sure if it actually is the Sibiricus, the Siberian race. But it's certainly because there's a little bit of confusion as to exactly where the cutoff is. But compared to other birds at the same site, it was distinctly rufous. And that was another trap. So, all goes on.
Ja, breedbek stond open.
I thought everyone would get this right. Because there was a paper in Dutch Birding about these two. If I had been doing this quiz 3 years ago, this would have been a Saunders tern. Because that's what we thought all the little terns in Oman and in the Middle East in winter were. All the books said they were Saunders terns. But we now know that actually none of them are Saunders. They're all littles. And this is a little tern. The Saunders would be not so dark grey, and would have much clearer white secondary area. It's a Saunders, a poor shot. Okay.
Dwergster.
These wheatears can be difficult when you get strong light. Again, this was on Lesbos, where I think the northern wheatears, there are different subspecies, Lipotanica, I think, have a slightly more Isabeline wheatear-like appearance. But the very strong dark markings in the greater coverts and the lesser coverts here, medium and lessers, the very long wing going all the way here, and the not so broad edges to the primary coverts are all features of northern wheatear. It's not the same bird, but a similar bird. A little bit more obvious compared to this is a molting juvenile Isabeline. They have extremely pale edges to the tertials at this age, not so long a wing, and generally paler coverts, less contrasting coverts. But they can be very tricky, those two. So the answer was a northern wheatear. Yeah. Yeah. This would have been too easy, I think, if I'd shown you the next slide. But it's probably too difficult like that. So this is a least sandpiper.
Kleinste stond open.
This was in Mexico. couple of months ago. And least versus long-toed is a very tricky area, but the head pattern is what to concentrate on, and the upper parts. The upper parts are rather plain with just a shaft streak. And this head pattern is rather like most of the other stints. Whereas a long-toed stint has this very peculiar, it's called a J-like mark. It's where the dark on the lores joins with the forehead and forms quite a strong feature. They don't always show the pale base, the bill. It's probably covered in mud. And importantly, long-toed stint has darker centres to the scapulars. But you couldn't see that in the original shot. There was much less to go on. So. These pippets can be really tricky, and sometimes the longer you look at them, the more confusing they are. So the trick is just to give them a quick glance and go with your gut. I chose this shot because it looks a little bit, well, that's the same bird. And if possible, I always look at the upper tail coverts and rump if you see a photograph of a tricky one, because that's where you get the best clue. This bird has no streaks at all, just so this is a meadow pipit.
Graspieper.
Yeah. Just go back. You can't see the rump. But another feature to look at is the scapulars. The scapulars tend not to have such obvious dark centres in meadow pipit. And if we go to a red-throated, here's a red-throated with these very strong dark scapular centres, very bold pale stripes on the back, and of course streaking going down the rump and upper tail covers. And a slightly stronger head pattern. I'm not sure what the guesses were for this, but
A lot of people said curlew.
oh, okay. Yeah. It could have been. I thought people would go for bar-tail gullet, which is actually more difficult to tell. But yeah, it's really, really difficult. This, I think well, to be honest, I can't see anything that would definitively rule out curlew. Habitat maybe, yeah.
So what's the answer?
Okay, the answer is a whimmerel.
Yeah, regenwulp.
This is the same bird.
Why is it not a Hudsonian?
Well, if you had guessed Hudsonian, I mean, you can't really. Hudsonian would usually be a little bit more buff coloured underneath, but I don't also think you could say for certain if this was a Hudsonian or so. Well, I wouldn't be that mean. Actually, I would be that mean. It's more obvious when I look at the next slide of the same bird. I think it's more obvious. So this was a Pacific swift.
Siberische vierzwaardig.
In Mongolia. I think the depth of the tail fork, I don't know Horus swift, I've never seen one, but I don't think Horus would have such a strong tail fork, but in other respects it's probably very similar. But here I think the proportions are more typical. But it's an important thing to bear in mind when you're looking at photographs, is that while photographs, they always tell the truth, they can convey impressions that we don't register with our eye. I mean, there's this photograph doesn't lie. That's how the bird looked. But this is usually not the impression we come away with when you watch a bird in the field. You'll see a Pacific swift as being incredibly long-winged. But it's important to remember when looking at photographs that they don't always convey the same impression. This is another, well, this is a kind of 50-50 guess. This is either a common scoter or a black scoter. And they are really difficult. And this is a black scoter. So that's Americana.
Amerikaanse zeeeter.
And it was when I was sent a photograph of one of these birds from Madeira that was believed to be a black scoter, Americana. And I really had to investigate deeply because I couldn't tell straight off which one it was. But after looking at lots of photographs, I noticed that there's quite a useful difference in the profile of the bill. In the black scoter, it's well, concave, convex, depending on which side, but this line is quite curved. And in common scoter, it's easier to show in a sketch. So this is black, and it has this rather sharp demarcation here, whereas common is a slightly different profile, slightly different bill shape. But at least if you guessed, there was a 50-50 chance you'd get it right. And this is really easy. No. And the next photograph probably won't make it any easier. It's the same species, but maybe slightly more familiar. So this is a juvenile corn bunting.
Grauwe gors.
I see these birds on Lesvos every time I go in August, July, August, but I don't see them anywhere else. And I don't think it's a very familiar plumage, especially now that corn bunting is becoming so rare. And finally, it's illustrated now in the latest edition of the Bird Guide, Dan's Champagne to the juvenile. It should have been there years ago, but it is there now. Another pipit. I don't know if many of you will have straight away sensed that this is one of the big pipits, Richards, Tawny and Blythes. And since you don't have an awful lot to go on, you really have to look at the bill shape and maybe the supercilium. And to my eyes, I think Blythe's pipits has a subtly different character, a different bill shape, usually a shorter supercilium. So if I show another shot of the same bird, you can see it's got this replaced median covert and some greater coverts. This is a Richards pipit, grote pipit. Yeah. I was in Oman. And a pelican. Usually we just have to worry about white pelican versus Dalmatian. But of course, this is a mystery quiz. We have to look at all the pelicans. But this is actually a Dalmatian pelican.
Roeskop pelikaan.
And commiserations to anyone who guessed pink-backed, because they are really quite similar. But the key features for pink-backed is the leg colour. This lead grey colour is very characteristic of Dalmatian. And pink-backed usually has a larger dark area here, as you'll see. This is a pink-backed in Kenya, with that really prominent dark spot and very bright fleshy legs. Another difficult one. There are two two sunbirds. When you're in Oman, there's two birds. There's this one, and there's the other one. So these are in the same bush actually. This is a Palestine sunbird with a very dark tail. Sorry. Very dark tail and really very plain. And this is a female Nile Valley sunbird.
Nijlhoudingzuiger.
But when we're there, we only look at the males. Again, this is in the same bush. So I think that's the law. And thank you for taking part. If I ever do this again, I'll try not to make it so difficult.
Yeah, sure. We'll quickly switch presentations.
Ja, goed is hij aan het zoeken. Is niet. There we go. Ja. Dank u wel. Top.
Killian just quickly left the podium, but he might not be able to pronounce all the Dutch names anyway. So, like we said, whoever wins this mystery bird quiz will have to create the next one for next year, and we'll also go home with this very nice bag sponsored by Swarovski. There's a couple of honorable mentions. There were a lot of people who scored about 8, 9, 10, so you really need to get a bit more points to enter into the honorable mentions. Let's see if this works. Pim Rijk, 12 points. And number 199, who's that? Pieter van Velen. And then we go to the top 4 contestants. 13 points, about halfway. This is Tim Schipper, Vincent Stork, and number 217. Okay, and then we go to the winner. Let's maybe do a bit of a ruffle. There is, I think, 15 points. He was on the slide before, so I just had to remove Killian from it from another mystery bird quiz we did. He's always in the top 5, and that is Koen Stork. Even though you look very surprised, we want to congratulate you. And I'll let Killian just hand you the bag.
Say that I was at the Sorbonne meeting in November, a couple of months ago, and Koen came to me and said he was taking part in the mystery competition, and he was already working on it then, doing lots of practice. So, very good job.
All right. Nou,
dus succes Koen. Volgend jaar.
Ja, succes Koen. Lekker gewerkt inderdaad. Once again, Killian, thank you very much for all the efforts you've put in. Not only this mystery bird quiz, but also all the signatures and the little scribbles in the books. So thank you for that. Right now, I'm gonna switch to Dutch because it works better.